Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Iron Mission. In today's video, we're going to be talking about something that you actually don't have a whole lot to say about.
Nope.
And that is, if you think that you're ready for a touring motorcycle, in particular, we're going to be talking about the Harley touring motorcycles. This is the place for you to be because we're going to talk about the good and the bad, some things you can think about before you spend a lot of money on one of these bikes. Why are you here for this?
Really just to talk about being a passenger on this luxurious ride.
Because you've got your own bike, but a long time ago you used to passenger, and you passengered on a limited. And so you could talk about that a little bit later in the video, but we're going to go over the good, the bad, what you need to know. Thanks for being here. All right, so maybe you are somebody who's been riding for a while and you are looking for that next bike. Maybe you want to go on some longer trips, put on some serious miles, and whatever bike you've got now is not doing it for you. And that's when you start taking a look at the touring bikes. And that's really what I did. And that's why I have this. This is a 24 limited in the tobacco fade. I'll show you more about that when we get into the video. But these are great bikes for putting on a lot of mileage. But there are some things to consider before, like I said, before you spend all that money. Okay, let's look at the good. As I kind of already alluded to, one of the good things is there is no bike better suited than a touring bike for putting on long miles. We've done lots and lots of 500 and 600 mile days, done a couple of iron butts. If you don't know what that is, that's 1,000 miles in a single day. I've done two. Joanna's done one on her Road King, and I couldn't think of a better bike to put serious miles on. Why is it so easy to put lots of miles on a touring bike? Well, one, it's the wind and weather protection. You've got the full fairing. You've got a nice tall windshield. It's going to protect not only your face and your chest, but on the limiteds, you're also getting some wind protection and some weather protection for your hands. And that's especially true with the Ultra Limiteds as opposed to some of the Road Glide and the Road Glide Limiteds. Little less hand protection there. And pretty much everything we're saying is going to apply to both the Electra Glides or the Limiteds and the Road Glide. So the fairing, we'll get into that in a later video, but I actually haven't found that to matter all that much. The other really important thing is, of course, the lower leg fairings that we have here. So huge. We went to Sturgis a couple years ago and it was absolutely pouring for a couple of days. And the nice thing was, for me, I was relatively well protected, especially because of those lower leg fairings. My legs were dry, where a lot of other people were riding Softails, or like I said, Joanna's got that Road King. Their feet and their legs were soaked. Me, not so much. And so it actually does make a pretty big difference and something you should strongly consider. The cruise control is absolutely outstanding. Now, Harley, on their Softail line for 2025, they have cruise control across the board. But that is something to me. If you're going to be putting on a lot of miles, the Limiteds, the touring bikes have the cruise control, and it's just nice to have that right hand take a break a little bit when it is basically you're sitting there for an hour straight and you're trying to do 70 miles an hour or 80 or whatever you're doing on the highway. It's nice to be able to put that cruise control on and switch up and not have to have both hands on the handlebars at all times. Another thing to consider is on the touring bikes, you're going to get that extra inch of rear suspension travel. And I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but even in the stock configurations, it matters. It was one of the first things I noticed when I was on Joanna's bike on the Road King. Same thing if you had a Street Glide or a Road Glide, that suspension has 1 inch less travel and it makes for a little bit rougher ride. Where on my Limited, I didn't notice nearly the amount of bumps going down the same exact streets that I would notice on Joanna's Road King. So the Limited models, those full touring models, a little bit more suspension travel, a lot more comfortable ride. Something else to consider, especially if you're someone who wants to do that 500-600 mile day, the gas tank. On the touring models, you're getting a 6-gallon tank, and that's true of the Street Glide and the Road Glide and the Road King as well. But on these Limiteds, you're getting that 6-gallon tank as well. And when you're averaging roughly around 45 miles per gallon, could be a little less if you're on the highway and you're really cruising. But when you get that 6-gallon tank and you're not having to stop for gas every 150 miles, 175 miles, that actually makes a big difference. And at least knowing you have that extra fuel capacity in case you're getting into areas of the country where it's like, well, I'm not seeing a gas station on every corner, that can make a big difference. One of the other things I absolutely love, especially if you're looking at the touring models, is again, This is a liquid-cooled engine, and so what that means is we've got radiators. That's what these lower leg fairings are for, and they're cooling the heads of the Harley-Davidson engine. What does that mean for us? It means the engine runs a little bit cooler, the bike stays a little bit cooler, and you don't feel quite as much heat as a rider coming up as you're going, especially when you're coming to stops and things like that. The engine just runs a little bit smoother than, let's say, my wife's Road King, where we don't have that liquid cooling going on. And of course, you're probably thinking, what about one of the main features, one of the most obvious features of the touring bikes for Harley-Davidson, and that is you've got the Tour Pack in the back, and that, I'm telling you, is a game changer. I have friends who have street glides, who have road glides, not the limited versions, and one of the first things they do is they put on a detachable Tour Pack, thinking, okay, well, I'll just use the Tour Pack when I go out on long trips, and I'll take it off when I'm just riding around town. In every case where I've seen that, they leave the Tour Pack on all the time. They've never taken it off. Why? Because once you get used to the convenience, you don't want to lose that. So that Tour Pack is great. You can put 2 full face helmets in those Tour Packs. If it's just you, you can put your helmet, all kinds of other stuff. I absolutely don't think I could ever ride a motorcycle long term as my main bike without having that Tour Pack on there. It's just the convenience factor is way, way, way more than you would expect if you haven't ridden one of these bikes before.
Well, I am here to talk about being a passenger. And now, I have been a passenger on many of his other bikes, and it was not really an enjoyable experience, especially if you have no backrest. This one is basically the top of the line. If you want to be a passenger and if you're going anywhere, I would highly recommend looking at this model, because sitting as a passenger is really the best. I don't know if when you were young, you rode on the back of your parents' bicycle and that yellow thing with the little buckle, it was cozy, you felt secure. Same thing here. You are like surrounded in the seat. The seat is very comfortable. The back support is very comfortable, and you even have these little kind of quasi armrests that kind of wrap around you a little bit. And not to mention you have floorboards. So you are very comfortable. You're actually quite spoiled in that back seat. Now, if you are thinking about this bike and also considering you're a passenger, keep in mind that getting on and off for the passenger is really relatively simple. You just step on the floorboard with your left foot and you swing over your right. And I'm tall, and there's also multiple ways you can put your leg straight over. You can kind of swing it over the back. There's multiple different ways, and it's really quite simple. There's really only one negative that I can possibly think about, and that's the music. If he was playing his music, I could rarely hear it. Now, I don't know if it's the only one. Now, of course, I had a full face helmet, so that might contribute to it. But don't expect your passenger to enjoy your tunes.
Now, before we get to the downsides of these motorcycles, I've got a video in the upper right-hand corner as well as in the description below. If you're looking to buy a motorcycle and you want to get the best possible deal, that might be a video that will really help you out. Now, of course, there are some downsides. I don't want to make it sound like everything is awesome about a touring bike. You just need to get one. When it comes to the limiteds, there's a couple things to consider. And one of them is really a personal preference thing, and that is, can you ride a bike that has the Tour Pack on the back? You hear, oh, it's a geezer glide, and that's an old man's bike and all that stuff. I don't really care. I like that Tour Pack for the conveniences that I already mentioned, and so I'm not riding this bike to necessarily be the coolest dude on the face of the earth. But if that's something where you're going to have a hard time getting over that, well then maybe a touring bike isn't for you with the full Tour Pack on the back and the lower leg fairings. But for me, I really, really like those conveniences. And like I said, once you have them, you're not going to give them up. So I'm okay with having the Tour Pack on the back. But if you are somebody who thinks that you might struggle with that idea, well, certainly something to consider. The other major factor is the weight of these motorcycles. They're going to be well over 900 pounds. And once you start loading up the saddlebags and you start loading up the Tour Pack, you could get to close to 1,000 pounds. And what that means for you is you really do and really should have some skill riding a motorcycle before you hop on one of these. Don't do what I did. And basically what I did is I had taken a break from riding for a few years, number of years, went out and we were renting motorcycles, which were usually soft tails. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and buy the limited because that's what I want. And that's what I did. But if you're a newer rider or you are somebody who's not a confident rider, I'm not necessarily saying this is a great bike for you. Get your confidence, make sure you know how to ride before you jump on one of these, because I can tell you, as somebody who grew up on sport bikes all the way back in the 1990s and loved racing sport bikes, it takes a tremendously greater amount of skill to ride a 900-pound bike slow than it does to ride a small bike fast, and it's not even close. And so those, parking lots and doing U-turns, and inevitably if you're riding with a group or you're riding somewhere where you're not used to riding, there are times where you're going to have to make some turns that are pretty tight. We went to the Tail of the Dragon, me and a couple buddies last year, and we were taking back roads all the way down there. It was awesome. But there was a point at which we were in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, and my GPS is telling me to go one way, and it's kind of obvious that we're supposed to go another way. Well, what do? I tell my buddies, hey, wait here. I'm going to go down this street. I'm going to see if it's actually a way that we can go. I get down there, and what do I find? Well, it is a dead end. And I mean, we are literally in the middle of nowhere. This road is very, very skinny. It's not quite a 2-lane road. There's drop-offs and grass and dirt and gravel on either side. And I'm like, wow. And it was on a rather steep hill, as you would expect in the eastern parts of Kentucky. And I had to do a U-turn on a hill on a less than 2-lane road on this thing. I was able to do it because we have taken some courses on advanced rider training and have a little bit of skill. But if you're a new rider, I can't even imagine at that situation what someone's going to do. So bottom line is, it's a big bike, it's a heavy bike. You have to know how to ride a motorcycle and have the confidence. If you're somebody who's smaller in stature, you can certainly ride one of these. I see people do it all the time. But if you're smaller in stature, or maybe you don't have a whole lot of physical fitness, that's something to consider, right? Maybe the big 900-pound touring bike is not a great idea. And also, if you're someone who's a little bit newer to riding, think you want a touring bike, and maybe after watching this video, like, I'm not quite so sure, check out that video in the upper right-hand corner. We'll put it in the description below as well. I've got a really good selection of the 3 best Harleys for newer riders. That will help you. Listen, there's going to be more to clean on these bikes because you've got the tour pack and you've got the fairing. And I happen to be somebody who wants to ride a clean motorcycle. I would feel horrible riding down the street in a dirty bike. I've got plenty of friends like, I only clean it when it rains. That's fine. If that's you, no problem. For me, I need a clean bike. And trust me, you're going to spend a lot more time cleaning this than a lot of the soft tails and the cruisers and that kind of thing. Listen, there is no way of getting around this. These touring bikes, they're slow. They are slow. I have a cam in this bike. I have a Woods 22 XE, and I come from the sport bike world. I can take this bike to its limits in a straight line, and it's slow. Okay, I've said it. There it is. It's not just Harley. Even the new Indian bikes with their new Power Plus engines, relatively speaking, they're slow. So if you are someone who really needs to have a lot of speed and a lot of adventure and a great handling motorcycle, this is not your bike. This is not what this is designed for. I hear it all the time. Harleys are slow. No, almost all cruisers and touring bikes are slow. That goes for the Goldwing, that goes for the Indians, that goes for the Harleys. When you've ridden sport bikes and you've ridden some of these bikes that can really put out horsepower and they're only 400 or 500 pounds, trust me, they're all slow after that. This is not why I ride this bike. I'm not riding it to cut up the corners. I'm not riding it for awesome quarter-mile times. I did that in my youth. That's not what this is for. So if that is something that's really important to you, trust me, again, you can put the cams on here, and that goes for the Indian motorcycles, and you can do all the work, but they're still not necessarily going to be considered fast bikes. Something else to consider, and I'm glad you're here watching this video, is you're going to spend money, right? The touring bikes are expensive relative to other types of bikes. And again, it doesn't matter if it's Harley, it doesn't matter if it's Indian or Honda. You're looking at the upper echelon when it comes to cost. For these bikes new, you could easily be into $30,000 and above, closer to 40, depending on the brand and depending on what you want. These bikes can get expensive, and so you really have to make sure this is something that you want. But there is no more capable bike than a touring bike when you're out on those long distances, and I absolutely love this Limited. It was worth every single penny I paid, but you are going to pay more for a full touring bike. You've got the tour pack, you've got the lower leg fairings, you've got the extra suspension travel. So all those things can add up. The cruise control, the newer bikes have tire pressure monitoring systems and the RDRS systems, and you've got the GPS, and so you're going to pay for those things. I've touched on this already, but again, this is a bike that is going to be perhaps the least forgiving when a rider makes a mistake. Of all the bikes that are out there, this is probably one of the worst handling bikes, right? Again, just touring bikes in general, not just talking about the limiteds. I don't care if it's a full touring Goldwing or an Indian or any of these other bikes that are really, really large. They are the least forgiving. Why? They're the heaviest. They are the least responsive to input. They are going to be a little bit more challenging to maneuver. And so if you're in a parking lot doing slow speed stuff, I've seen this happen more than once where somebody doesn't know how to ride in slow speeds and in parking lots and in traffic, and they're in the middle of a turn, and what do? They grab the front brake. Well, when you're turning and you grab the front brake, if I'm on a 400-pound motorcycle, it's irrelevant. If it starts to go over, you just put your leg down and the thing's gonna stop. You do that on a 900-pound motorcycle and you grab that front brake in a panic and you're in slow speeds and the wheel is turned. Once that bike starts to go, it's really, really, really difficult to keep it upright. And so just keep that in mind. If somebody pulls out in front of you, do you have the rider skill? Are you always aware of your surroundings? Can you minimize those things? Because if it happens, if somebody pulls out in front of you and you have to do an emergency maneuver, that's pretty easy to do on a 4, 5, and even 600-pound bike relative to a 900 or 950-pound bike, especially if you've got a passenger on the back. So it's just something to keep in mind that these bikes are going to be less forgiving if there is a potential hazard or a mistake. I remember one time there was a pallet. It was the classic reason why we do some of the training that we do when we ride a motorcycle. I was going down a 4-lane road, and there was pretty decently heavy traffic, and the car in front of me, all of a sudden, it went really fast into the left lane. I wasn't that far behind this car, but the reason why they made that emergency maneuver is there was a pallet sitting there on the street in the right lane, and I had to do the same thing. I had to brake, I had to get into the left lane right away. Luckily, there wasn't a car next to me, because if I had hit that pallet, could you imagine what that would have been like sliding on that wooden pallet on this bike? It would have been a really, really bad day. So those are the types of things that you have to consider. Can you handle the larger bike? Do you have the confidence to do so? And if you do, this might be the bike for you. All right, everyone, thank you so much for being here. I hope we gave you something to think about. And again, if you want some ideas on some really good beginner bikes, check out that video in the upper right-hand corner. If you want to learn how to get a great deal on a motorcycle, check out the video in the lower right-hand corner. As always, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week. Ride safe, everyone.